it's never a punch or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's when they fall.
Yeah.
They hit the corner of the building or something. You know.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is it's the unsupported weight of their head hitting the concrete. I mean, it's the only real logic of headgears. It's not because somebody's going to hit you, it's because you're going to hit your head on the floor. But you see what I'm saying. So if I'm teaching Krav, I mean, and I'm saying you're really going to learn hardcore self-defense, and you're going to learn defense against a knife and defense against a gun. The guy's trained for 3 years, and if he doesn't know how not to freak out when they pull a gun, he's still going to get shot, right?
How about overkill in a situation if someone attacks you, and I'm sure you teach the fact that once you take control, you have to stop. You have control, you can't go stick into a knife and break their ribs. That all ties into this.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're talking to, again, I think the starting point, without getting on too many tangents, is that truthfully, in order to be teaching them anything of value, is we go from teaching athletic skills to teaching emotional skills to teaching mental skills on top of that. And that's then teaching them everything from self-control to being able to be objective in the situation, to be able to be calm and react immediately, to be able to not get rattled with all of the other stuff. And ultimately, it's those same skills that teach you how to apply that same mental control and mental behavior in a public speaking environment, in a work environment, in a fight or flight reaction, in an office confrontation. And all of that, truthfully, is what leadership skill is all about,
really
right?
That's where you're trying
Yeah.
to stand that part. I certainly agree with you.
Yeah.
I was thinking more in line of the newsletter
Mhm.
and the lesson of the week. Are they written age appropriate, or are they applicable to
The
both?
newsletter right now, no. But I do have an iteration on the like for an adult folks and stuff.
Yeah.
But so Kickin specifically is not specific. It's designed specifically.
Yeah.
Although really it's only one article. That's the kids article. The healthcare is universal. All the stuff is universal. So it's one article in the puzzle.
Right.
I don't think he's on anything else, but we do have on.
But all of the leadership stuff is not only adult appropriate, it's a stretch for the kids, which is always my intent anyway.
Yeah, but not a lot. It's not, the units I picked, specific, you'll see this.
Mm-hmm.
In a newsletter, we could just make our own articles for the kids' articles.
Yeah, you can cut and paste and insert. Yeah. Yeah.
And with the HTML, the tutorial is easy. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
But the units in the leadership thing are specifically like this unit in particular, right? If you look at this month, well, it's going to be next month. You're getting it a couple of weeks early, right? So that everybody can staff and review.
And has everybody noticed that? Is, again, there's too much stuff to mail, and the assessment is we're now at a point that anybody who's going to be with us probably has an iPad and a laptop, and they're savvy enough to pay attention, right? The pay attention part, I think, is the most difficult. So now what it's set up to is anything new that goes live on the site, it's already automatically going out as a notification to your email. So you're getting emails that everything from interviews that are new to artwork that's new, and then they're automatically getting emailed, Kickin newsletter and that material in the format, but mostly is to remind you to go back to the site and go pull it and use it. Yeah.
The leadership, like, what you're saying is that there's two iterations. Iteration one is all the stuff that's coming to you to consume as a school owner, and look to train on and stuff like that to their staff. The other side of it is what we have partially started with Kickin, and now with leadership and all this other stuff. It fits into the second category as well as the first category, which is real time to the student. Pass it either directly on, or we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
So there's two dynamics. But if you look at leadership curriculum in this argument, right, in this kind of construct of how you implement the stuff, kids and adults, the example of this month's curriculum is actually pretty good because it's the 5 keys to wealth and happiness. This is key 3, mastering financial pressure. What the hell does that do with the second?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you read the doc, right, if they all come with a handout. And I would say print them and hand them.
Yeah.
Give them to everybody. Then by the time they're done with this thing,
Yeah, I mean, you can email it as a PDF, you could insert it as an HTML email, but better would be print it out, hand it out to them in class, and email them a PDF. And, well, actually, they'll have it as a download when they go to the web page. Yeah.
it varies. So right now, that's up to you.
Yeah.
You consume it, do what you want with it. If you want to show them the video, show them the video. Just play it straight from the thing, right? The next version of it is we'll have a separate members website for your student to go to. So you can direct them directly there. They can go log in with their own unique password, right? Only for that student. Go look at it, download the stuff themselves, right? So it's just
Yeah. And when we get there, correct me if I'm wrong, don't let me promise anything that's not going to happen anytime soon. But,
it's the anytime soon for this thing.
well, we're already 6 months behind schedule. But what's going to happen, and next Carol, but what's going to happen is you log in, you enter the data, then it's going to automatically merge your phone number, your school name, your address and all that stuff. And it'll be, in essence, co-branded, the National Association and you. The conversation that we have behind the scenes is that the support material coming from the National Association enhances credibility. So it's an implied, if not, in fact, actual endorsement. So our thinking behind the scenes is, rather than make it look like it was created in-house, it looks like it's part of a big national organization, and then it's co-branded with your material. And then the links back then start to give them their own little website with these resources and handouts and all the stuff that they can pull out. And we are not now, nor will we ever be, trying to dictate what leadership physical curriculum is. Because what Nick might add as an additional component to a Croft school is completely different than what you might add to yours as an additional physical component. But all of the other stuff, which is really the value added anyway, is automatically happening.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Well, and
that's exactly the conversation.
That's the conversation he and I have had for a year. Yeah. Well, and you probably all had the conversation with me of, don't stress so much about it. Just get something going and, renew them, and then you don't have to worry about it. But, I mean, that's my personality. But now it's all done. You don't have to stress. Carol.
Would it help in selling it to Crowell High School, because this has been 2 years of not getting past some barrier, if we showed them, March, here's what you...
Absolutely.
And then April 1st they saw it.
Yeah.
I would, what I do with my guys, I think is pretty useful for your guys too, but I had inherent people that were from broke backgrounds who had a hard time not being extremely children. That's a different mental barrier than what you're dealing with, but the process I use to get them over the mental barrier might be the same process that works for you.
You're talking about your staff.
My guys, yeah. So my guys were like, it was a big transition. You know what I mean? It was from X to Y, and Y was 3 times X. It's like, holy fuck, right? How are we gonna do this, right? But so I had.
That's 6.
I know.
That's 6.
I gotta stop. So I had to walk them through.
I've heard him cuss about 3 times in 2 years. He hears me about 3 times every hour, but.
My only point is this. I don't want to. We need to get back to this, but my only point was I knew I had to get them over that mental barrier. Otherwise, if they didn't think that they were worth more money, they'd never be able to ask for it. Never be able to get it, right? So I walked them through. Basically, if you look at what I put together, it's the same list of people, right? So the staff meeting I had with them basically was like 4 hours, right? And the train, just follow my train of logic. Don't worry about the details, but the train of logic I think is useful, right? I knew where they were. I knew where I wanted them to be. So I walked them through a course of conversation that was about, okay, well, basically it was this. Okay, you might be right. You might not be worth, $349 a month. You might be right. So let's talk about who is, right? Who are the people in the world and in the community who not only command a lot of money, but who do what we do, right? Let's start at the beginning. Who just earns a lot of money? Who makes a ton of money, right? And we start at the top of the list, and you end up with like sports stars, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, whoever, right? So you have this whole list, and they're not completely relevant, but they're not far off, right? So you have this list of people, and then you kind of guide the conversation, you're leading the conversation, and I led them down the path where, toward the middle of the conversation, we got to, okay, well, now let's look at people who are in a similar business as we are, right? Who develop people, You know, who are the people out there who help teach character skills and leadership skills and you know, these types of things. So you end up with a list of guys like Tony and Zig and Brian Tracy and you know, Peter Drucker, you know, all these different people, right? So now what you've done is you've created a construct that they can now believe in. People will pay this money to them. Now how do we link that with us, right? So my link was, well, I mean, this is a much longer conversation than what, but you know, you my train, right? So the link was, well, I agree with you. Those people command, you know, you can go to Tony's thing for 120 grand a weekend, you know, and do his deal. So do that on math. He'll consult with you once a month for $1 million a year, right? Let's do the math on that, right?
We've got to raise our prices.
We got to raise our prices. So I did some math on that, and I wasn't shy about numbers, right? So we did the math on it, and then I said, now let me ask you a question. Which would be better? Would it be better to pay Tony for a weekend at 125 grand to go do a 3-day immersive experience and then never see him again, or would it be better to have Tony talk to you every day, talk to you 3 times a week? Which would be more valuable to you, right? And of course, that leads to the conclusion that smaller pieces over more time with more repetitions is better than just one thing,
Yeah.
right?
Certainly more than a weekend seminar.
Certainly more than a weekend seminar, right? So I'm helping them connect the process to the people, to the money, to them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, because otherwise what they do is they say, well, people do dance lessons at the community center, and they put themselves in that category.
Right.
Why would anybody pay?
How about the question, why would you think I'm worthy of getting paid that kind of money?
That's exactly what's in their head. That's exactly what's in their head. They don't think they're worthy. So my challenge during this session, and it was ongoing, it wasn't just once and they were fixed, right? But my challenge was, how do I get them to believe that what they do every day is as or more valuable than what Tony does once a weekend? That was really in my head. Date with Destiny or Financial Mastery in Fiji, what we do 3 times a week for 4 years, right? Which one? And then I had to urban, and drag it, right? I had to figure out how to get their emotional reasons to believe in it higher than the logical reasons not to. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and like your guys, all of us have this, is your staff somehow gets amnesia over what all the different benefits were that they accomplished over the time of their training. And they revert to, why would somebody pay me that much to teach them a front kick or an elbow or a jab? Right? So, and then when you sit and talk to them, they say, well, what has happened in your life as a result of in your case, Krav Maga training? And, you know, if you have that conversation, of course you can't preface it with all this because, you know, their defenses are up. You got to go the other way around. Well, what has happened in your life? Well, what do you mean? I learned how to, well, yeah, but did it bleed over into other areas of your life? Did you feel more confident when you're out on Saturday night? Did you feel more attractive? Did you have a better sense of mental acuity? Do you have a better sense of sensory acuity? Were you more aware of things going on around you? Do you think that carried over into your career? Were you more capable in your career? And I mean, we've pretty much all have our students tuned into, I mean, all the stuff we were talking about earlier, of all the things that they accomplished. And if you're not doing that on a constant basis, you're not anchoring back in, right? And then it's got to be every staff meeting, you're having that conversation about your students. Oh, you know, Mary came in and told me she's so happy to be doing this because she's lost 32 pounds. Great. And John came in and told me that he just got a promotion at work, and the biggest thing was he didn't feel confident, and he didn't have to do some public speaking and so forth in his job, and now he's overcome that barrier, right? I mean, you're having that conversation with them all the time, and then the.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
At the meetings, or talking about just in general when you have a conversation?
With your staff, both. Right. And all this stuff we talked about yesterday, the quick start and all that stuff, that's really the biggest thing, right? Is you've got to be drilling in a real belief system for what the outcome is in what you do, right? And I think all of us know in our heart, although we forget it sometimes, is truthfully, if somebody's trained with you 3, 4, 5 years, you've had a life-changing experience. And the life-changing experience mostly isn't about they lost 20 pounds, how they could go to Weight Watchers and do that, right? It's about suddenly they feel more confident, suddenly they're much more self-assured, they're more aware, they're better at interacting with people, they've learned conflict management skills, they've learned stress management. Would everybody agree with that, right? But then our staff gets amnesia and they think it's just about teaching this and teaching this and teaching this, right? And then they say, well, they teach that down at the rec center for $85. Why would somebody pay us $300 to do the same thing? And by the way, you know, he's a $120,000 a year attorney and I'm just a Krav instructor. Why would somebody teach me, right?
We had a problem with our head instructor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are doctors and lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
and I pay DC people, you know, what do they want to hear from me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of the reason we're not, and he wouldn't do anything that came out of any book, because he
Right.
would be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned, he's gonna say, now here's this program, you know, but we do have in-class stuff.
Right.
And it's, I feel we must need to bring up this stuff,
Mhm.
because they may not read it, and this will at least help
Right.
them. How can we convince them that he can have discussion around this, or what could make it easier for him if he could do this?
It's better he doesn't have to. Just tell
So
him
he
what-
doesn't have to discuss it at all?
He does, but tell him to go watch a video.
Huh?
Tell the instructor gets to tell the student, go watch this video here.
That's it?
And then
Here's the handout.
Tomorrow, here's the handout, and then the day after, here's a drill that really.
I would give you a more complicated answer. I would give you a more complicated answer, which is probably typical. You know, take the simple and make it complicated. But when I opened originally, the one instructor that came from Washington D.C. with me, and he was never a full-time staff member there. His name was Kemp Reed. Do you remember Kemp? Kemp could never get over the idea of teaching success skills. When we first started all this stuff, it was Steve LaValle and I had gone to Waco, Texas and done SMI, and I'd already come preconditioned from June Rhee. But we started doing the lesson of the week. And the lesson of the week, the first iteration is Psychology of Winning, which was the biggest selling Nightingale Conant CD or, you know, audio cassette program of all time, I think. And it was 10 lessons, and one of the lessons is positive self-dimension, and I couldn't figure explaining what positive self-dimension was to anybody, so we dropped that one, and we used the other lessons, and we did 9 of them and rotated. I mean, that was the starting point. And Kemp was really hung up on teaching anybody to be successful. And I can't explain to you why he quit me making inflation adjusted probably $70,000 a year and became a Domino's pizza driver. You know, last I heard from him. And I had a few guys like that who just like never could get out of their own way. One of them ended up going to work for a liquor store for $8 an hour because he was pissed off about making me rich. It's like, well, let's see, you're making about triple working for me, but you're pissed off that I'm driving a Porsche or whatever, right? But I could never get Kemp over the thinking, and given where he had come from and everything, it's hard to imagine, but I could never get him over the thinking that there was something wrong with teaching people how to be the winner. He just had a screw somewhere in there that it was, you know, it was incompatible with his way of thinking, right?
What about
Yeah.
something wrong with teaching them? But I don't think if it's worth that kind of money, I'm just not that, I'm not worth that kind of money.
Yeah. See, the thing is, here's the reality. The $120,000 a year or the $250,000 a year attorney, to a great extent, the reason they're coming to something like Krav, rather than like going to Weight Watchers and lifting weights, is they view that this is like a more holistic, right? And you know, type A, they're not gonna use that word, but they view this as something that's a mental focus, mental conditioning, it's physical conditioning, it's going to improve everything from my reaction time to my athletic ability, to my weight, to my mental focus and my emotional state, right? I mean, if they're on the upper income, more intelligence, that's how they think about this, right? I mean, and even if you go back to that Jennifer Lopez movie, right? It was pretty good. It really wasn't about all of a sudden she's a trained killer. It was all of a sudden she's confident, right? I mean, that's what, you know, bottom line is she's the abused wife, and she now learns how to beat him up, but she could have, just grabbed a gun. It wasn't about responding. It was about having the self-reliance and the confidence enough to confront the situation. Fair enough? And so we've got to convince your guy not that he's Tony, but that the outcome of the students is valuable, right? And I think it's a difference.
That same $120,000 you're trying to pay Tony, $50,000 for the weekend to do, he can do, better.
Well, he can do it for real over 3 years, because the weekend it's come and gone in 72 hours.
And he's not spending $50,000 over the 3 years, right?
What's that?
And he's not spending $50,000
No,
over the 3 years.
no,
It's the,
yeah,
it's the
How do you
material,
get it?
right,
it's the material that's worth it, not the fact that Tony is saying.
right.
Is you take what he's saying,
Yeah.
take Tony out of the picture, and you just repeat the same thing. Now you're saying the exact same thing Tony would say. It's the material.
Yeah. Well, and some of them get hung up on credentials or education or one thing or another. But I mean, the vast majority of the guys like Tony are high school dropouts, or they don't have any real credentials. They just developed the ability to relay the material. He was either a high school dropout or a high school graduate. I'm not sure, but that was yeah. Yeah. Well, Brian does now. Brian was, I believe, either high school I think he was high school dropout, GED, and ended up getting an MBA. So he's got an MBA now. And he was actually running a martial arts school, way back when. But usually that's not a very productive conversation with them. But the productive conversation is, let's look at the outcome our students are getting. Forget about it being you. You're just a conduit. The process of the things that we're teaching them to do. First of all, if I ever did get into a life-threatening situation and I was able to get out and save my life, what is that worth? What is that worth? Well, that's priceless. What are the odds of one of our students, after we've taught them situational awareness, after we've taught them all the things that we're teaching them, actually getting into that situation in the first place? Pretty low. Now, what is the value of that situational awareness? What is the value of the emotional control? What is the value of the mental control? Do we in fact believe that if somebody trains with us 3 or 4 years, you don't use the black belt terminology, but if they've gotten to the equivalent of a black belt, are they truthfully going to be more successful in every other walk of life? Is it likely to have a positive impact on their relationships? Is it likely to have a positive impact on their career? Right? Do we believe that that actually happens? If we believe that that actually happens, what's the financial value of having a dramatic boost in their confidence and their focus and their discipline and their career? If I'm a lobbyist, a K Street lobbyist, and I'm making $250,000 a year and they have an incremental improvement in their confidence and their ability to speak with people, their ability to have situational awareness and the ability to do public speaking, how much is that worth? And the higher they are on the income scale, the more a marginal improvement is valuable for them. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't get bogged down in this guy doesn't think he's worth it, because as Toby was saying, you can get him thinking in terms of, look, the process that's built, you're purely a conduit, already creates that in them. And then the other material that you're worried about is going to be handed to them, emailed to them, delivered to them, they get to watch it, right? You don't want him to get in the reference of, a couple little videos and a couple little handouts and they pay an extra $100 a month. You don't want him to make that linkage, right? What you want him to be making a linkage is the process that we have in place is the process that develops that. These are support materials to teach them on an intellectual basis what we're already teaching them emotionally. And you're the conduit, you're not really what the deal is. So it's not that you have to be Tony Robbins. It's that the process we've built creates these outcomes. These overlaid support tools are the additional support tools to make sure they really get it. and we're just the process to get them there.
To the extent
What's,
he's going to say he's not comfortable being a conduit, because he doesn't know how to talk about this.
well, but he already is.
Of course he
No, here's the answer.
He does not believe
Here's the answer, Tim. That's complete, utter bullshit. It's complete, utter bullshit, Tim. Now, let me ask you a question. If you have a student that you've taught for 3 years, are they like wimpy, unable to respond to stressful situations? Are they going to be the one that freezes up in the corner in the dark alley, and when somebody's swinging a club at them, they get killed even though they have all this skill set? Or have they learned mental acuity? Have they learned situational awareness? Have they learned unshakable confidence? And are they able to respond to a situation like that? And if, and
But he would say, yeah, I know how to teach this physical stuff, and I say it there, to there. But he doesn't feel that he can talk about this stuff.
yeah.
He doesn't feel like you take a book, read it, and then give it to the students and explain it to them.
Well, he may be right. I mean, he may either not have that academic capability, or he may not have the ability to translate it, right?
If you give him the script, if you give him the video for the individual
Right.
students to read or listen to,
Mhm.
okay, give him the handouts, and then he only becomes a facilitator of the information. It seems like to me like it's in a different category.
At the very least, I would think he could facilitate a discussion of it.
Yeah. Well, see, you know, this goes back almost 30 years. But the first round of staff that I had were exactly him. The line that I heard recently, I was having dinner with Pat Worley and a few other people, and he made the line. We were out at a Junri 50-year anniversary or something. And the comment he made is, he said, "I learned how to fight in Texas. I learned how to be a martial artist in Washington, D.C." Okay, that was a pretty insightful comment. Now, you have to translate it to the Krav guys who don't like the word martial arts or whatever, right? But the point of the matter is with this, is he says he knows how to do the physical stuff, but if he's producing good students, ultimately it's about the mental stuff, it's not about the physical, right? Is a student builds confidence through physical mastery, overcoming obstacles, getting progressively more confident, right? But the outcome is if they're really going to be able to, and again, you guys are more fighting centric than most, if they're really going to be able to master a self-defense situation, it's because they have the confidence to respond in an objective manner. They have the ability to control their emotional state. They have the ability to focus in the midst of all that adrenal stress and so forth and control that. And they have the ability to react appropriately immediately, as opposed to get locked up and get frozen, which is all mental and emotional. None of it is actually physical, right? We just know that the best process to get them to that mental and emotional capability is through mastery of the physical that then moves into master of the mental and emotional. And again, my argument would be so many times, whether it's the Olympics going on right now, or whether it's Joe Louis and Jeff Smith and Bill Wallace, or anything in between, Floyd Mayweather, is the difference between the best and the also-ran is rarely physical ability, because there's a whole stack of them that are fabulous in physical ability. And again, my experience with our stable of kickboxers is, you know, a couple of the also-ran who were fabulous physically, the difference was they didn't have like Jeff's mental state, right? Is I never in my life saw Wallace, Lewis, or Smith get flustered in a fight. I mean, doesn't matter what they got hit with, doesn't matter what was going on, they're on task, right? But almost everybody else at some point or another in their career, I saw them get flustered, right? An awful lot of them, it was the first time they got punched in the chin, right? So as soon as their knees got weak, you know, the third tier guys, as soon as their knees got weak the first time, they were out of the fight for good, right? So don't tell me it's physical mastery that is the ultimate outcome of what we're getting, right? Now, it's a necessary foundational level, but it's not the ultimate outcome. Does anybody disagree with that, right?
Honestly, what you're doing is augmenting the old
Right. Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And
It never changed, that.
yeah.
It's never gonna change.
Well, the mistake that Americans made is in many times taking something that was spiritual and mental and making it just purely athletic, right? And so in my own lineage, you know, that's not the way June Rhee thought about that, but when he left the Texas guys there, it was all about blood and guts and we're going to break each other and all that stuff, and they like forgot the other parts of it, right? And truthfully, I sort of grew up with like a mixed message because, you know, I was with the blood and guts guys, but an awful lot of the really good athletes were really like not very good people, right? So it was, you know, growing up with a mixed message. I don't know if you know it, but I trained with Roger Green for like 3 years. And that was a really interesting environment, I got to tell you. You would walk into Roger's school and there's a big sign on the back wall. There's 2 types of animals in the world. There's meat eaters and there's grass eaters. Which are you? Right? And Roger, who was probably 35 at the time, and I was 16, was dating Lisa, who was also 16. And was asking a bunch of us to break into his house and steal his knife and gun collection so his soon-to-be ex-wife wouldn't get it. And we would be training in the classroom, and he and Lisa would be locked in his office drinking and smoking. The first time I ever went to a tournament with him, Roger came up to me and was explaining what a wonderful thing it was to be woken up in the morning with a blowjob, and held his belt up to me. And I was 16 years old, right? I was 16 years old, straight-laced. My June Rhee instructor was the deacon at his church and was holding his belt up soaked in gin to explain to me what their partying was like last night. So there were some mixed messages, to say the least, right?
Well, we've all seen those.
This was Roger who?
Roger Green, Joe's first black belt. What's that? Mm-hmm. He was a Tracy school. Yeah. Yeah, so he was a Tracy school and had, you know, Joe and Al Dacascos weren't Tracy's people, but they had recruited them to be like the face of Tracy's for a while. And then Roger was one of the early Tracy schools. So, but again, I mean, this is not a new concept, right? But it's plugging back into what all this stuff should have been to begin with. But then putting American, I always described it to people as what we have done is taken it out of Zen type of things that aren't understandable, and take, you know, American PhDs, psychologists, etc., who have really done the research, and if you give him a book and say, okay, I want you to distill this book into 3 minutes every week and teach this lesson every week, doesn't work, right? You know, my example from 30 years ago was, you know, we're going to do a chapter in Psychology of Winning, and here's the tape, and we'll watch the video, and we'll discuss the chapter. And it's about positive self-direction, and positive self-direction is just goal setting. And if you feel comfortable internalizing the chapter and talking about it in your own language, that's fine. But here's the paragraph that you can tell them in the process. Steve LaValle's process was every Sunday night he would write out the paragraph, and then he would have his guys point to it. I'm not serious. He'd have his guys point to it, and with the class sitting there, he would read it. Well, by like the 5th or 6th class, the guy's got it memorized. So now he's going like this, and he's saying the paragraph. But that was the lesson of the week, right? I always felt like I was better to kind of overtrain them, and then I would give them kind of this option, but most of them would be able to just weave it through the class and then have a little mat chat, right? I mean, is that a fair statement? So, but the difference was with me and Steve is his assumption was his guys weren't going to ever like be like academic nerds like I was, so if he could just kind of point at it and do it, it was just fine. And again, in both cases, my case and his case, we were dealing with 80% adults at the time. I mean, we were dealing with 80% adults. So, I mean, it flipped, but, and ended up being more kids, but this wasn't kids stuff, this was adult stuff. Oh, we're good on time. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? So.
You could also use it as a advertising for the upgrade.
Oh, of course, of course, of course.
A lot of it in the docs you'll find in the bio is, anytime that you're a martial artist, or almost all of them, 2/3 of them, say really nice things about martial arts, or they give credit to, like Brian Tracy.
Yeah.
Incredibly gracious, incredibly humble, and talks a lot about how, like, you know, while he was learning martial arts, he didn't realize it, but what he was really learning was da-da-da. You know, and Tony was the same thing, you know, and just really, like, really useful testimonial content.
Yeah, who was there and what was it? Well, San Diego. In San Diego when we had Brian. Maybe there? No? God, he was great. But yeah, yeah, yeah. And milehighblackbelt.com is the other one. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Questions or recap from what we were just talking about? Is this making sense? And see, again, there's 2 points, and this goes back to staff development. For staff development, you've got to keep reminding them, and probably a better way would say it is keep sparking them to remind themselves of what they've really accomplished through their own martial arts training, right? And then you've got to keep constantly getting them to talk about, and you talking about, and each other back and forth talking about student results. And again, where you get into problems, and you know, I don't know, there was one of the many testimonials I rounded up for the book or something was saying, you know, people think that I'm just about the money, but what they found was, you know, something like that. But when you get martial artists thinking that you're in it all about the money, whether it's your own staff or whether it's, and who cares what your competitors think, right? But whether it's your own staff or it's your black belts or anything, it's because you've missed this component. You end up in a meeting, you're talking about where the gross is and how many renewals and why the hell didn't he renew and this, that, and the other thing. And you've missed the reminding them of what they've accomplished, hopefully because of you, right? I mean, that's where the internal guys versus the external guys. The internal guys automatically have that reflexive loyalty and reflective respect for what they've accomplished because they attribute it to what you've provided, right? The outside guys are attributing it to what somebody else provided, and typically the guy was charging $69 a month, and right, you have that dissonance, right? But if you constantly remind them what martial arts is, what they've accomplished, and it's not about they won a trophy, it's not about they were the best fighter, it's not that. You're constantly reminding them of what they've accomplished in their life, what they've accomplished mentally and emotionally, what the value had been to them of the martial arts training. Then that helps to eradicate the you're in it for the money, because, well, if I was in it for the money, I should have charged you a hell of a lot more than I charged you for what you got, because look at how valuable it was, right? And then you're constantly talking about student results. And where you can really go wrong is you're talking about people's money more than you're talking about student outcomes, right? So if you end up in a staff situation where you're talking about, well, this one's broken, this one's this, and this one's this, and this one's a deadbeat, and this one's this, well, all of a sudden it poisons the entire environment you have. You've got to be talking about, you know, let's figure out how we're going to really help Billy get over those behavioral problems. And we've noticed it in class. I mean, if he's having those behavioral problems in class, guess what's happening in third grade? I mean, maybe we should go talk to his third grade teacher and maybe set a little conference with mom and the third grade teacher and figure out if that's the kind of conversations you're having constantly, then you don't end up with blowback from the staff that you're being kind of pushy about making sure Joey doesn't drop out when he's a green belt, but let's make sure Joey's actually going to be a black belt, because I mean, if we're going to have a permanent life change in Joey, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. It's not going to happen overnight. Wouldn't everybody agree? I mean, you see what I'm saying? So you've got to have, and you know, I have absolute faith we all believe that way, but if you're not talking that way constantly with your staff, then you end up with dissonance in their mind about being aggressive enough and focused enough about going and getting new students and going and renewing them. And suddenly it becomes all about the money, and sooner or later they have an emotional dissonance about, I'm not doing this for the money, I'm doing this for, you know, the martial arts, the love of martial arts, and no, this is just a commercial, you know, you get that break point, right? And again, like with your guy specifically, is you've got to anchor in. The cool thing about Greg there, who trained for 3 years in Krav with us, is not like he's good at doing a knee and elbow and a kick. It's that, my God, the personal and emotional and spiritual transformation he's gone through in 3 years is amazing, isn't it?
I think we've got that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think there is not an issue about the value
Right,
of
right.
training.
Right.
Okay, the problem is the value of him as an instructor to want individuals to pay such a high, quote-unquote, high price for the training.
Well,
He
that's
doesn't value himself enough.
see, that's the, you know, it goes back to that, you know, I hate to always retread the past, but it goes back to, like, you're getting everybody together and you're saying, okay, you know, assume I have the time machine, if I could take you back, you know, the moment you decided to train in martial arts and take it all back, give you back all the money, give you back all the time, would you do it? Well, what if I gave you 100,000? What if I gave you $500,000? What if I give you $1 million? If you're not really like doing that with the staff and doing that with the students and really getting them to believe into it, then you get those kind of like price value objections, right? And it seems to me sometimes, or the price value objections is they're wasting their time like looking at what everybody else in the area is doing and comparing what you should be doing to them as if you're no better, and it's a comparable, right? And who in here would say that most of the comparables in your area are really outstanding, fantastic, they're doing a great service to their students, and they're putting all the time and effort, money and resources into developing their program like you are? I mean,
He especially, and he sees it as bait and switch because we have not just one price.
Mhm.
He says we have one price, that's an okay price, and I'm giving it up already, and why should we pay more? Well, we're just making some excuse up to charge them more. And especially if you're gonna say, well, you either have to go up or you're stuck in the same program.
mm-hmm.
He probably doesn't mind getting paid more money, does he?
Well, he doesn't mind, you know, he doesn't mind us paying him more.
That's always the irony.
Seriously?
I've had staff in the same breath. You're not paying me enough, we're charging too much. You're not paying me enough, we're having to work too hard to get new students. You're not paying me enough, we should be satisfied with 182 students. Why do I'm happy to pay you as much as you want. This is what percentage it can be. Here's the outcome, right?
He doesn't want to do anything emotional with us.
Yeah.
His idea of what the upgrade should be is, one of our instructors moved to Florida. She couldn't stand the crowd there. She said they're a bunch of assholes. And so she got into functional training. Functional training's been around, I've known it for a long time, as an exercise physiology. But he's like, oh, this is a new thing. And Al said, well, you know, we don't want to do all that stuff. We're going to do, what do you want to do? You own it. What do you want to do? And he said, well, functional training. And I have to be certified, and you're going to pay for it. I'm like, no, we don't have any money. We're not going to pay for it. We can't do this. And this isn't what upgrade is about. You know, how do you exercise so that
What
you
is
can
functional
get
training?
the problem out, huh?
What is functional training?
It's like, you know, instead of just lifting weights or something, do something that like has the normal athletic motion.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
That's nothing new.
No, that's that's way nothing new. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
now that's what he wants to do. Oh, but first we have to weigh, he has to get trained, we have to pay for our money. No, yeah.
Carol, ultimately somebody has to become the alpha in your organization. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's.
So this happened while I was.
I know, but you know, you and Al are going to have to become like the alpha in the organization, and then they're going to have to toe the line. And you know, well, let's move on. Anyway.
But what about the bait and switch, you know, which is,
Well, okay. Here.
He wants to bait and switch it. He wants to sell one thing and then sell functional training at a higher level. What's the difference?
that's true, but he still has
Well,
this.
I mean, that's the question. You feel that functional training is more valuable than crop. You would be comfortable taking a crop student and selling him functional training. We want to take a crop student and sell him something that's about 100 times more valuable than functional training.
Well, it doesn't mean you're not incorporating that in, but that's like, it's.
Functional training into the thing.
But I mean, that's a trendy buzzword for shit 30 years ago and 20 years ago, and you know, I mean,
I think the
it's why we used to do ankle weights when you're kicking, and then it screws up your form.
They used to call it
Yeah,
farming, which is carrying jugs of milk.
yeah.
Before that, they called it like.
without denigrating it, what it really has value for around the professional athletes. They're hiring their own special trainers.
Right.
We're training them in functional training to prevent injuries, to allow them to continue in their careers. We had one student in our school who was
Right.
a trainer. He's working with a professional wizards athlete. Okay, he's assigned to him.
Right.
All right.
Right.
This athlete said, just get me through one more year. He worked with him for 6 months. The guy signed a 5-year contract with the Wizards because he felt, after the training, he felt like he could in fact continue for 5 years.
Sure.
Now the thing is,
Yeah.
the thought is, well, if he can do that, can we develop a program in our school as an add-on now, not the basic program, whereby we can get our students to stay longer in the program to avoid injuries, to get more out of our regular program, as part of, not as a total package. With the upgrade.
Okay.
I was wondering if one of the hangups is the concept of if you don't upgrade, you just recycle through the old stuff. Is that
I
one of the hangups?
suspect what he would like to do is, those of you who like functional training, sign for the upgrade. It's okay if that's only 10% of everybody. And furthermore, honestly, you can't do functional training for, you know, he says it's one-on-one. No, that's one-on-one. You get 10 people, 20 people in a
Right.
class.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Well,
But he's okay that that's only a small.
ultimately, you're having the martial arts equivalent of the argument that goes back to Jun Rhee and Bruce Lee arguing about curriculum, because it was Jeet Kune Do was just great if I'm working one-on-one with McQueen or Coburn or something. And Jun Rhee's version of it is, I'm going to have a class of 50 people. How do we do the same damn thing, but we do it with 50 people at a time? It's really the same argument, right? I mean, unless I'm missing the point. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's one more step of it being about physicality rather than it being about a holistic development.
One more step about it being about this guy.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, going back to, you know, Bruce Lee, I mean, you know, pick up the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, which was really just a compilation of his notes when he passed away. But, you know, it's all about mental acuity and focus and its development and a hell of a lot of Joe stuff, especially at the, all through his life. But in the early stuff was all about your focus and your ability to be confident, your ability to focus externally rather than be internally focused. Maybe this is a different shift, but I've always thought the first thing to convince the staff of is, again, you're not using the term black belt, right? But if I have a student for 3 years, and then I have them for, let's say, 5 or 6 years, versus I have them for, let's say, 6 or 8 months. And in the Goju Kempo Taekwondo version of this stuff is anywhere you go with your like martial arts shirt on, you have somebody who says, yeah, I used to take lessons, right? And they always say something to the effect of, well, you know, what did you do? How far did you get? Oh, I got to my green belt, right? And all of us as fairly advanced and somewhat cynical martial artists think in our mind, and we usually don't say it to them, is, well, you know, you got to the point you weren't very good and then you immediately reverted and no shit now, right? And so what was the point of even bothering? Is that a fair assessment, right? I mean, that's sort of what goes through my mind. Yeah, yeah. And so the first thing I think to convince the staff is you're either going to get them to the point where they've had life-changing benefits and have turned this into a lifestyle, and that you've truly had a permanent impact on the student. Or you're going to expose them a little bit to martial arts and they're always going to suck as a martial artist, right? And if they drop out in this period of time, they're always going to be horrible, right? I mean, does anybody disagree? You know, they train for 6 months, they drop out, they're never going to be good at anything. All we did was train them how to suck as a martial artist, right? And to be kind of proud of being a quitter and dropping out. So the first thing we've got to have the completely congruent belief system with all the staff is that if we convince them to be there 3, 4, 5, 6 years, that it's a complete win-win. We won because we had the pleasure of teaching and developing that person to that level. We had a win because we have high-level students who are going to do everything from bring us referrals to be assistant teachers and so forth. We won because they made a financial contribution to the school. They won because whether it's 3 years in or 6 years in, they got permanent life-changing benefits that's not going to go away. And we all know the physicality will go away. All we have to do is look at one of our black belts that we re-sparked the relationship with 10 years later, and now they're 100 pounds overweight. But we know the mental and emotional skills that we've taught them are always there at the forefront, and their life is better because of what we did. Is that a fair thing to say, right? So the first thing we've got to have them convinced at is you're either going to have most of them suck, or you're going to convince them to be here long enough to have had permanent life-changing benefits, right? And so if you get that belief system, and I mean, you know, to the point, you know, like in our case, the leadership ones are in blue tops and the master club ones are in black tops and everybody else is in white tops, and I'll sit there with the instructor looking at class and I say, well, this is a real disaster. What do you mean? You got 28 people who are on the verge of dropping out, and 5 of them that are going to be here and commit to black belt. Well, what do you mean? Well, if they're in a white top, they're dropping out, right? Right? You know, and so that's the conversation with the staff member. What do I want to do? Pain, pleasure. Anchor them into you are teaching them how to be a dropout who sucks in martial arts forever, or you are teaching them how to really be a black belt, have life-changing benefits, and have a win-win. And you're either ending up with a win-lose, or a lose-lose, or a win-win, and it's 100% our responsibility to make sure that they see the life-changing benefits and they believe that, so they're going to commit so they won't suck forever. And again, we're back to staff training, but I mean, you've got to be that emotional about it, right? And you've got to get them where they believe it. So if you're reminding them of what they accomplished by this, and you're talking about what other students are accomplishing through this, especially what students who've gotten to this point are accomplishing with this, and then you're pissing them off with, they're always going to suck unless they get committed to be a black belt. If they don't renew, they're going to drop out. I mean, and really anchoring in the pain, that's the first step, right? Because otherwise, say, oh, class was great today, everybody had fun. Well, yeah, but so what? Well, what do you mean? Well, you have 28 people there who, you know, best case scenario, they're going to be here 6, 7, 8 months. And how good are they going to be at martial arts after they've dropped out for 6 months? Imagine what they're going to be like after that dynamic class and they drop out in 2 months. And what are they going to be like a year from now?
Sir, what's the best way to handle the objection? Okay, we program, it's, 12 months. I'd like Joey to continue. I don't want to commit to a black belt program, I don't want to commit to leadership program, but I'm willing to sign up for another 12 months.
Right.
I guess I don't quite have it right in my head. So if he
Sure.
done well for the 12 months, he could move on to the next segment. But we're saying it's not, we want to not have them do that.
Well,
And they may commit 6 times for the next 12 months.
here, Tom Hopkins Sales 101 is I first have to get to the root of this. Is it an objection or is it a condition? Right? A condition is, my problem is, when the new administration comes in, they may flush us all out, and I've got X number of time that I'm certain that I'm going to be here, and after that, I don't know. I work for Rockwell International. I'm on a one-year, contract. It expires X date, and if it expires, we may move to, South Carolina, right? So is it that, or is it an objection to our family truly making a commitment to know and be confident we're going to get our child to that point, right?
Or is